Black Chaos comes again. Book 1, Black Land. Episode 6, The Coming of Apep by Alan O.W. Barnes. Seble glided alongside me. "Are you headed to history?" she asked. "Actually, yes. Mind if I follow you? I don't really know where I'm going yet." We headed down the corridor. Several boys turned to look at Seble, several girls to see what had captured those boys' attention. One of the two football players chatting with Deborah Sinclair, Rob, tapped his buddy on the chest, nodding in Seble's direction. And that's when I just felt Ronnie's presence everywhere. Even in death, she's still with us. "Hello?" Deborah couldn't believe the boys had stopped paying attention to her and were actively staring at Seble. I have to admit, I was a little jealous of her too. Not that I'm into the less intelligent variety of jock, but recognition is nice. Outraged, Deborah yelled at her previously captive audience. "I'm hurting right now, you morons!" She nodded at Heather, and the two surviving girls of the popularity trio approached Seble and me. The taller girls loomed over us. "Hello, new girl." Deborah, the tallest girl on the cheerleading squad, stared down at my short new friend. "Hello," Seble replied happily. Deborah extended her hand towards Seble. "We haven't met. I'm Deborah. This is Heather. Where are you from?" "Seble, I'm from a lot of places. I've been traveling for years. We just spent 2 years touring Europe." "Wow, that sounds cool. We're having a get-together tonight, sort of a party to celebrate life. If you aren't busy, maybe you'd like to come." Seble turned towards me. "Are you going?" I wasn't invited. Seble turned back to Deborah. "If my friend Caitlin can come with me, I'd love to celebrate life." Deborah looked uncertain. I don't think she remembered I was alive. The last time Deborah spoke to me was probably in middle school. Then her expression completely changed and she brightened. "Sure, whatever." As she turned back to her girlfriend, there was an air of conspiracy in the way they giggled and shot quick glances at us. But I didn't know what that was about. Not yet. I wondered if they were going to acquire Seble. I mean, witches need 3, right? Or maybe they just needed to get her to a physical location they controlled in order to assure they asserted their alpha girl positions over her. I realized that beauty allows one to slip past some of the perception issues. I mean, Seble had only been at the school for a few minutes, and she had already commanded the attention of the elite. She seemed not to care. I picked up she was using her oblivious personality as her mask for the public, which is an easy way to disarm those who might otherwise be intimidated by her beauty. Still, her observations and reactions, as few as they had been, had already clued me in that she was much more astute than she let on. Seble turned toward me and whispered softly, "Do you think he will be at the party?" Seble nodded almost imperceptibly to her left. Her eyes fluttered in that direction, then shyly looked to the floor. Over her shoulder there was no question that she indicated Oscar. For just a beat I felt a pang of jealousy. This beautiful girl could certainly have Oscar if she wanted him, while I could only dream. "I don't know, Seble. Maybe. Probably." Her smile widened, overtaking her shy eyes. She turned and looked at Oscar, catching his attention. He mustered a return smile through his grief and exhaustion. Seble turned back to me delighted, then a concerned expression crossed her face. "I felt the earth move," she said. I rolled my eyes. "Yeah, he has that effect." "No, I mean," suddenly the ground shook, throwing us all off balance. I grabbed the wall to secure myself, but it didn't help, and I landed on the floor. I landed in precisely the right spot to see out the window of our hallway, and I saw something I did not comprehend in any way. It seemed like a moving, textured wall about 100 yards exterior of the school building. "What is that?" I asked as I pulled myself upright. Seble was already on her feet, running to the window. She looked up, just staring into the sky. When I caught up to her, I looked up to see what had her attention. It reminded me of the previous night's dream. A being, a creature so enormous I almost couldn't understand it from the ground, but it raised its head defiantly toward the sky, and at that distance, I could see the silhouette of the beast clearly. A snake? A serpent? What to call it? I didn't know for sure. All I knew was it moved like a snake, but it reminded me more of Jormungandr, the world serpent of Norse myth, than an anaconda. The creature was longer than a football field. Just its head and upper body rose at least 30 meters off the ground. Its body was about 7 meters wide and tall at any given point. It slithered around the school building, shaking the ground, occasionally bumping against the establishment and throwing the occupants about wildly. We were terrified and horrified. The intercom sputtered to life. Over the static squawks, I heard the principal say, "Stay calm. Follow your teachers to emergency positions till the crisis is over. The police and animal control are on the way." I laughed out loud. What good would animal control or the police be against that thing? Call the Army, the Air Force, for Toth's sake. Then I wondered where I'd gotten that expression. As I wondered, Seble seemed to be thinking out loud as well. "APEP," she breathed. Seble was still staring at the creature as it slithered by our side of the building again. That was when she said it, and I realized she knew more about what was happening than she let on. I remembered that word from the prayer I'd read to Bast the night before. "What?" I asked her. "APEP. It's a creature, a god, really." "So you don't think the police can stop it? Bast can stop it. Well, where is that cat deity when you need her?" Then an idea blossomed in my mind, possibly the craziest idea I've ever had. I turned towards Seble, grinning wildly. "You want to make a name for ourselves at this school?" I asked. Let's go figure out what that thing is, where it came from, and figure out how the authorities will stop it. This is a story. You mean you want to write about APEP for your journalism class? You're insane." Then she cocked her head and looked at me with an expression I would describe as evil. "Let's go," Seble exclaimed. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was kind of a stupid idea. I mean, what was I going to do? Interview the giant snake? I guess 16-year-olds are kind of stupid when it comes to self-preservation, huh? Getting out of the building wasn't too hard. No one expected anyone to want to get out of the building. Actually, I think everyone was trying to assume bomb shelter positioning. This is similar to tornado or hurricane positioning. The idea is to get as close to the center of the building and as far away from the windows as possible. That way, if a window shatters, there isn't much chance it'll hurt anyone. In this case, I think they were all trying to get as far away from APEP as they could. Footnote: I should clarify how I'm talking about this thing. When Seble said APEP earlier, I thought it was an animal name like a dog or a cat. I'm writing this the day after it happened, and I now realize that APEP is the proper name for an Egyptian deity also called Apophis. According to myth, he, or it, fought the sun god Ra every day. Worshippers would pray for Ra's victory against the snake every night. Eventually, Ra's daughter, Bast, the deity represented in the form of a cat I learned about at the exhibit, took up the task and battled APEP as Ra journeyed through the underworld every night before reappearing in the morning. Most theologians believe it was how the ancient Egyptians reconciled the sun disappearing every night. Ra, the sun god, went to the underworld to do battle, and he won every night. This is also why we have solstice celebrations to mark the time of year when the struggle becomes harder. The sun stays gone longer at night, where the battle becomes easier and the sun stays in the sky longer. APEP, or Apophis, was literally evil incarnate. Many scholars believe that Apophis was the character the Jews used as a model for their spiritual adversary, Satan. The other models were an Egyptian god named Set and a Zoroastrian deity called Ahriman. The Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians and the Babylonians, who were Zoroastrians, though there are plenty of folks who think this connection is oversimplified. A lot of scholars believe the Jews acquired many of their ideas about spirituality from those peoples. End of footnote. The only other trick to getting out of the building was getting past the school security officer, Donald. He is a redneck in his mid-50s. That guy is deaf and blind, not literally, but he perceives less than I would typically assume appropriate for a person in his position. Seble and I zigzagged around a hallway headed toward an exterior door. Donald, the security guard, looked back our way a couple of times, but every time we saw him turn in our direction, we were able to hide behind lockers or a trash can or something. I saw Donald look out at the giant serpent as we got close to the door. I heard him mumble something about not getting paid enough to deal with this. He turned and ran down the adjacent hallway as fast as his obese form could carry him, which was not fast at all. Once he made his way far enough, we jumped to the door and pushed, only to discover he'd chained the door closed. A big padlock impeded our ability to get outside. Seble glanced around and waved me over when she spotted a wide window in a nearby science lab. We pushed, but it was also locked. I ran to a closet in the next room to see if I could find a key or something to break through the glass. I heard a crash. I feared the worst. If Seble got hurt following my lead on this, I'd never forgive myself. I ran back to her. "Seble?" I called as I rounded the corner. Seble sat next to the window. I felt the breeze coming from it. I heard the sound of birds escaping, and that giant snake scraping the earth as it slithered. I looked at Seble for an explanation. "You okay?" I asked. Seble sort of shrugged her shoulders. Yes, it seems the glass was not affixed properly. I looked over her shoulder and saw glass fragments on the ground outside. I thought the creature had smashed the glass in, but what actually happened was Seble pushed the glass out. My turn to shrug. I started climbing through the opening. Be careful, don't cut yourself on the shards. We slipped out the window, landing rudely on the ground outside the school building and behind shrubbery that left some scratches. Now outside the school, near the main courtyard, I took a few moments to pull my smartphone and snap a few pictures. Seble watched me, fascinated by the phone and the photos. It occurred to me I had not seen her with a purse or a phone. We heard the scraping of the creature as it slithered somewhere nearby. We looked, but could not see it. It was a cloudy day. The early morning September fog had lifted a little, but not entirely. The humidity of the region near the Mississippi River was obscuring our ability to see the thing. Slowly, we crept away from the school, just a few experimental paces. I didn't want to get too far out, then realize APEP was upon us without a means of diving for cover. After creeping lightly a few paces, Seble decided we weren't in danger. She stood upright and walked to the center of the courtyard. Looking backward to the other side of the school building, she pointed, and in a voice much louder than I would have preferred, she exclaimed, "There it is. There is APEP."